Hi, Glenn here, Monster Guitars. I'm having a mad session. Well, not one mad session, it'll be over the course of some time of really putting in an effort to tidy up the workshop. That's included building some boxes back there, and I'm getting my wood storage area a little bit better organized. That's the plan anyway. And I thought, just because I'm not actually doing any proper work, but just getting things prepared to do work, it would be a good time to pay some attention to the blades here on my small benchtop jointer. Now, these are the original blades that came with it. I don't know how well you can see that. Maybe not that well, but oh, there you go. That's much clearer. They're kind of nicked and damaged in various places. I've replaced them, and the replacements, well, they work like new when you put them in, but they too are becoming quite nicked and damaged. And I could just keep replacing them, and that's a solution that works, but it's also quite expensive. So I'm going to look at, well, I'm going to think about the best way of sharpening these myself. If it doesn't work, well, I'll just replace them. But if it does work, then yay. This part of my workshop is still very messy, so I won't point the camera around too much. You might be wondering, why are we looking at a table router? You can't sharpen blades on a table router? What kind of madman are you? Well, no, you can't sharpen blades on a table router, obviously, but what's in there is a chamfer bit or a beveling bit, which will cut a 45-degree angle onto the edge of a piece of wood, like so. And I've used this bit to cut a 45-degree angle onto each of those corners there on this piece of hardwood. Actually, it's a piece of Rimu that was a length of tongue and groove flooring. That's the underside with the familiar line down the middle. And I'm going to use this as a block to hold the blades. And I was happy to use a 45-degree angle bit there because I checked the angle of the bevel on the blades of the jointer, and that angle is, I don't think it's exactly 45 degrees, but it's very close to 45 degrees. It's close enough that if I ground a 45-degree angle onto it and polished that and made it nice and sharp, it would function as it does now. It's that close. And I'm going to use this to hold the blades while I sharpen them, and I'll show you how I think would be a good way of doing that. Here's that piece of wood with the blades screwed on. So on the surface of each of those bevels that I cut onto the corners here with the router, I drilled holes aligning with the screw holes on the blades, and I screwed them on, both at the same height. So just to make sure they were at the same height, the edge of the blade is, well, the back edge, the non-cutting edge of the blade, is perfectly aligned with the edge of that bevel. So they're both sticking up the same amount. And because they are so, or if they were exactly 45 degrees, those bevels, then the cutting surface, the surface of the bevels of the blades, would now be sitting perfectly flat on this surface. They almost are, because as I said, the bevel is almost exactly 45 degrees. So by moving the block thus, I could, if it was sitting on the right surface, consistently sharpen those blades. I say consistently because if I was trying to hold each blade individually and, rub it onto a Waterstone or onto sandpaper, it wouldn't be consistent. My hand would move, it would be flawed. But this way it can be pretty much perfect. And I could sharpen them on just about anything, I suppose. I don't have oil stones, so that's not an option. I do have Waterstones. I've got lots of grades of sandpaper. Either of those would do the trick, because this is a perfectly flat surface, so I could tape the sandpaper down on there. I'll think about which way to go. I may go with the paper. Well, as I remarked earlier, the bed on my jointer is perfectly flat. So I've decided to tape some sandpaper down and use that in the first instance anyway. Now the blades were pretty nicked and beaten up, so I'm not starting particularly fine. I've gone right down or up, because it's down in number, up in coarseness, I don't know. I've gone straight to a 120 grit sandpaper, which is fairly coarse when it comes to sharpening, but it seems to be doing the trick thus far. We're not there yet though. Okay, because they were so nicked, they are still a little bit, so I'll have to take a fair bit off, which is why I've gone with the relatively rough paper. It's getting there. You probably can't see it from there, but I can. The extent of those nicks is slowly decreasing, so I will keep at this, and soon it'll be, well, soon it'll be smooth. Oh, you know, it'll be rough because I'm using rough paper, but it'll be smooth in the sense that all the nicks and bits of damage will be gone. So I've gotten all the major, well, all the visible nicks out of them. Now I'm just making them smoother, I guess you could say polishing them, by going up through the grits of sandpaper. This is 240. So I've done about a minute with the 400 grit, and that's really got a nice shine to it now. I will do just a little more though. Now, I don't know about you, but I've got lots of sanding discs, lots of fine sanding discs, but very fine sheets of sandpaper, I find the really fine stuff can be quite expensive. So I have less of it, basically, is where I'm going with this. So for the finer grades, I'm going to move over to my Waterstones for purely economical reasons, and I know that they are pretty effective as well. Well, with the workshop being in the state that it's in while I rearrange things, I've resorted to doing this on top of, I almost said an old freezer. It's not that old, it's just a bit grubby on top. Anyway, Waterstones. So I finished off with a 400 grit sandpaper, and so I'm picking up from there with a 600, 800 and 1000 grit Waterstone, and I won't need much time using these stones at all. This is just really to hone it up. And I've seen people go crazy, you know, 2,000, 3,000. I'm skeptical that would make that much of a difference, but I think these three should be worthwhile. Alright, that'll do for 600. Now 800. I assume most grits come like this, and mine aren't just built for dummies, but they've got the did I say grit? I assume most Waterstones come like this, and I don't just have the ones that were made for dummies, but they've got the grit stamped on the side. You'll see I've got them sitting in water. I don't store them in water. I assume that wouldn't be good for them. I've just got them sitting in water while I use them so that it's easy to wet them as I go. You should get fairly even parallel tracks. If one's much darker than the other, and you should have picked this up by now with sandpaper, but if they're not being rubbed evenly, then something's not right with the way these things are screwed on. White always looks dirty. That's just, is that even residue from metal? I'm not sure. Okay, 1000. Okay, that's as far as I'm going to go. They look about as smooth as I can imagine them looking, really. What am I going to do now? Now I'll take them off, and using my 1000 grit stone, I'll just rub the opposite side of the blade on there to get that burr off. Alright, so I've unscrewed the blade from the block. You can actually see the burr just peeling off the back there. And will I be able to do this with one hand while I hold the camera? Probably not. But I'll make a fool of myself trying. No, I'm not going to be able to do that. So I'll put the camera up on the tripod. In fact, why even stop the take? Let's just keep rolling. We say rolling even though we don't actually use tapes anymore. Just like we say hang up the phone, based on those old telephones where the receiver actually hung on a hook. Well, it doesn't anymore, but conventions are what they are. Alright, so I've just scraped the back of this with this 1000 grit block, so pretty fine. And that burr is now gone. Is it? No, not completely gone. No, it's not completely gone. Let's give it a couple of... And you want to keep the blade flat. If you roll the blade up like that, you're going to be taking the point off the end of the blade, and you don't want to do that. Okay. I'm pretty sure now. No, it's still not fully off. Maybe it's not abrasive enough. Okay, I can't see any remaining burr there, so I'm going to treat that as finished. Definitely a big burr here, still peeling off. Now I don't actually have any plans to use these blades in the very near future. Well, as the rain falls on the roof of my substantially tidier and slightly redesigned workshop. Don't look at that table over there or the immediate state of my bench. I will get there, but it's substantially tidier and slightly redesigned workshop. Where was I going? Ah, yes. I am going to test out my newly sharpened jointer blades on this quite rough, as you can see, piece of tortura timber. So, let's give it a whirl. Well, that is as good as a result as you could hope for. You can still, as you often can with jointers, you can see the lines of the blade, but that's silky smooth. Very, very happy with that. Jolly good. Okay. Yeah, I didn't feel comfortable leaving the video without actually proving that it works. Well, it certainly does. So there you go. You can sharpen your jointer blades at home. You don't have to buy replacements. More importantly, I don't have to buy replacements. Nice.